Right now, a monster storm is churning across the Pacific Ocean, and it has a direct path toward American soil. 200,000 people are in its crosshairs. Not on some foreign coastline, not in a country you've never heard of. American citizens, American families, people living under a sky that is about to turn violent in a way most of us will never experience in our lifetimes. This is not a precaution. This is not an overreaction. This is a Category 5 Super Typhoon, the highest classification that exists, and it is coming. To understand how serious this really is, you need to understand what Category 5 actually means when it arrives at your front door. Not the number, not the color on a weather map. What it actually means when that storm is on top of you. Sustained winds of 157 miles per hour is the minimum threshold to reach Category 5. That number means almost nothing until you put it in context. At 100 miles per hour, winds can tear the roof off a well-built house. At 130, cars get pushed off roads. At 157 and beyond, entire neighborhoods don't just sustain damage, they get dismantled. Buildings that have stood for 50 years come apart in minutes. Trees don't snap, they get ripped out of the ground and thrown. Shipping containers, massive steel boxes weighing several tons, become airborne debris. This storm isn't sitting at 157. It has blown past that. Sustained winds at the core have exceeded 180 miles per hour. The designation of Super Typhoon isn't given out freely. It means the storm has crossed a threshold that puts it among the most powerful tropical cyclones ever recorded on this planet. Now here is what makes this situation uniquely serious for Americans who live nowhere near the Pacific. Most people in the continental United States have never thought about the fact that America has territory in the Western Pacific. Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, Rota, these are US territories. The people who live there are American citizens by birth. They pay federal taxes. They serve in the US military at rates that, per capita, exceed almost every state on the mainland. Their children go to American schools. Their hospitals operate under American federal programs. And right now, those Americans are directly in the path of one of the most powerful storms on Earth. Guam alone is home to roughly 160,000 people. Add the population of the Northern Mariana Islands, and the number of Americans in the projected impact zone climbs past 200,000. That is a significant number of people, and unlike a hurricane threatening the Gulf Coast, there is no highway they can take to get out. There is no driving inland for a few hours and checking into a hotel until it passes. These are islands, surrounded by open ocean. When the storm arrives, you are in it, and when it leaves, whatever is standing, that is what you have left to work with. Help from the outside takes time. Ships take days. Aircraft can't fly into conditions like this. The isolation of these island communities during and immediately after a major typhoon is absolute in a way that is genuinely difficult to appreciate unless you've lived it. Let's talk about where this storm is going and why the forecast is so alarming. Tropical cyclones are notoriously difficult to predict with precision. They wobble. They shift north or south in ways that even the best models don't always capture until the final hours. A 50-mile deviation in track can mean the difference between a glancing blow and a direct hit. A direct hit from a storm of this intensity means the eye wall, the most violent part of the system where winds are strongest and the storm surge is highest, passes directly over a community. That is the worst possible scenario. Right now, multiple independent forecast models are in agreement. That is unusual, and when it happens, meteorologists use language they don't use often. High confidence. The cone of uncertainty, which represents the range of possible tracks, currently places Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands directly in the most likely path of this storm. Emergency managers activated their highest state of readiness 48 hours before projected landfall. Shelters have been opened and stocked. Schools closed. The governor of Guam signed an emergency declaration, which triggers the flow of federal resources and puts the National Guard on full activation. Residents have been told, not 3 days of supplies, not the standard recommendation, a full week, because after a storm like this, getting aid to every neighborhood takes time even when the response is fast and well coordinated. Now here is the part of tropical cyclones that people consistently underestimate, the part that actually kills people. It is not the wind. Storm surge is responsible for the majority of deaths in major tropical cyclones. When a powerful typhoon approaches land, the atmospheric pressure at the storm's center drops so low, and the rotational winds are so powerful, that the ocean beneath the storm physically rises. It gets lifted, and as the storm drives that raised water toward a coastline, it doesn't behave like a wave, it behaves like a flood, a sustained, relentless wall of seawater that can reach 20 feet or higher in the most extreme cases, arriving at the shore, and simply not stopping. It pushes inland, fills structures, cuts off roads, and holds its elevation for hours. On a small island, there is almost no inland to retreat to. Coastal communities, which on islands like Guam tend to be the most densely populated, sit at or near sea level. Storm surge doesn't just flood the streets, it enters homes. It sweeps through ground floors, it traps people who waited too long to get to higher ground. And then on top of the surge, there's the rain. Super typhoons don't drop rain the way an ordinary storm does. They unload it. A slow-moving, intense typhoon can dump 20, 25, sometimes 30 or more inches of rain on a single location within 24 hours. When that much water falls that fast on an island with limited drainage, flash flooding doesn't build gradually. It arrives all at once. Streets become rivers, hillsides collapse, vehicles get swept off roads that were passable an hour earlier. And here is the cruel part. The flooding from rainfall is coming from above, while the storm surge is coming from the coast, both simultaneously. A community can find itself being squeezed from two directions at the same time. Survivors of super typhoons consistently describe the experience in terms that are difficult to convey through a weather report. The sound alone is unlike anything in ordinary human experience. It is described as a continuous roar louder than standing next to a running jet engine, and it doesn't stop for hours. Windows don't rattle and crack, they explode inward, even inside reinforced concrete structures. And Guam has built a significant amount of its housing stock specifically to withstand typhoons. The sustained shaking and pressure from winds of this magnitude is violent and deeply disorienting. There is nothing to compare it to. The forward speed of this storm adds another layer of danger. It has been moving at roughly 10 to 12 miles per hour. That is slow for a typhoon. A fast-moving storm is catastrophic but brief. It rips through and exits. A slow-moving storm lingers. It gives the wind more time to work on structures. It gives the rain more time to saturate the ground. It gives the surge more time to push inland. Every additional hour a Category 5 eye wall spends over an island is another hour of maximum stress on every building, every road, every power line, every person sheltering inside, and power will go out. That is not a possibility, that is a certainty. Power infrastructure on islands is inherently more vulnerable than on the mainland. There are no backup connections from neighboring regions. When lines come down, and they will, the only way to restore power is to physically repair every section of damaged infrastructure on that island, with equipment and personnel that also need to be transported in. After Super Typhoon U2 struck the northern Mariana Islands in 2018, some communities went without electricity for over a year. Not weeks, a year. That is the reality of what recovery looks like in a geographically isolated territory after a major storm. Communication will fail during the storm. Cell towers are exposed and vulnerable. Satellite links can go down. People sheltering inside during the height of landfall may have no information about the outside world beyond what they can physically hear, and what they will hear will be the storm taking the island apart. The federal response picture at this moment is active. FEMA has pre-positioned supplies and personnel in the region ahead of landfall. Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, one of the most strategically significant American military installations in the entire Pacific, has been placed in protective posture. Naval vessels that were in port have been moved offshore. Standard practice before an extreme storm to prevent damage to ships at anchor. Federal emergency declarations are already signed and active, which accelerates the movement of resources. But federal response, no matter how fast and how well organized, cannot bridge the gap between when a storm of this magnitude makes landfall and when outside help can arrive in the quantities needed. That gap, the first 24 to 72 hours after a super typhoon passes, is when communities are entirely self-reliant. What you have in your shelter, what your neighbors have, what your local emergency infrastructure has stockpiled, That is what carries you through until help arrives in force. This is why the preparation window that has just closed mattered so much. Residents were told for weeks, get your supplies in place, identify your shelter, know your evacuation route, and do not wait to see how bad it gets before you act. Because by the time it looks bad from outside your window, it is already too late to move safely. The broader pattern this storm fits into is worth acknowledging. The Western Pacific is historically the most active and most intense basin for tropical cyclones on the planet. It produces more storms, and stronger ones, than any other ocean region. The fuel driving that intensity is ocean surface temperature. Warmer water at the surface provides more energy for a storm to feed on as it intensifies. This typhoon underwent what meteorologists call rapid intensification earlier this week, gaining more than 40 miles per hour of sustained wind speed within a single 24-hour period. That rate of strengthening is extraordinary. It means the storm went from dangerous to catastrophic faster than many residents and some early forecast models anticipated. Rapid intensification events have been documented with increasing frequency in the Western Pacific in recent decades. The practical consequence of that trend, whatever drives it, is that storms in this basin are capable of reaching catastrophic intensity with very little warning. Small island communities that cannot evacuate by land, communities that face supply chain delays, even in normal times, absorb the full impact of that reality with limited ability to mitigate it. It is worth saying plainly, because it matters to understanding how this story unfolds after the storm. Federal disaster response to U.S. Pacific territories has historically lagged behind what comparable American communities on the mainland receive. After major typhoons, the gap in response speed and resource availability between island territories and mainland states has been stark and well documented. The reasons are partially logistical, geography is real, but the consequences fall on American citizens who have no less claim to federal support than anyone living in Florida or Texas. Landfall is expected within hours of this recording. The outer rain bands have already begun affecting the islands. Conditions will deteriorate steadily and then rapidly as the eye wall approaches. There is a point at which moving, going to a shelter, getting to higher ground becomes impossible. Winds alone, long before a Category 5 eye wall arrives, reach levels where walking outside is dangerous and driving is worse. Emergency managers are consistent on this point across every major storm. When the order to shelter comes, move immediately. Do not wait to assess conditions. Do not assume it will weaken before it gets there. Move. The people of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands know typhoon season the way coastal communities everywhere know their local hazards. This is not their first storm. Many residents have lived through multiple direct hits. There is generational knowledge in these communities about how to survive, how to help neighbors, how to get through the hours when the storm is on top of you. That knowledge matters enormously in the immediate aftermath when outside help hasn't arrived yet. What comes after landfall? The scope of damage, the speed of recovery, the scale of what needs to be rebuilt will take days to fully assess. If you have family or people you know in Guam or the Northern Mariana Islands, reach out now while communications are still up. Once the storm makes landfall, getting through may not be possible for hours and potentially much longer. 200,000 Americans are about to face one of the most powerful storms on Earth. That is not a regional story. That is an American story. We will have a full update as soon as conditions on the ground allow. Stay with us.